Greta, you have a really incredible and heartbreaking story to talk about your experience in the education system. So we have Miracle here.
Yes.
We don't have your son here.
Yeah.
But I'd like to start with that story. Can you talk about where your son Terrence first went to school?
He first went to school at Ecclesia Christian.
Okay, a private school?
A private school. Well, we started at A.M. Pate
Okay.
Elementary, and he wasn't able to read after first grade.
Okay.
And so that prompted me to put him into a private setting, and he did. He learned how to read. He was thriving, but when he went to fifth grade, I could no longer afford it, so I had to place him back in a public school setting.
What were you doing to afford the private school to begin with?
Just working long hours.
You said the Red
cleaning.
Cross?
Yes, I worked at the Red Cross for 18 years.
Okay.
And just cleaning restrooms.
For the school?
For the school.
They had a program where you can clean?
Yes.
And so you were doing that to help make the tuition?
Yes.
Because your son needed to be in a Christian environment, you said?
Yes, and I had two in there at the time.
Okay.
So, yes.
All right.
So after that, like I said, I no longer could afford it, so I had to move him back to a public school setting. Sixth grade was okay. You know, he was in all honors. He did well. By the time he got into seventh grade, he was already smoking marijuana and, you know, just getting with the wrong crowd. You know, so I'd go to the school and I'd say, hey, you know, what could we do? Try to talk to counselors and, you know, try to talk to the teachers and just try to see, hey, what can we do? Because I have to work, you know, so... You know, there was no answer. And so I received a letter saying that I was going to be charged for court because he hadn't been coming to school. So that's how I found out that he wasn't even showing up.
So you didn't know?
I didn't know.
You were putting him on the bus?
I was taking him to the front door.
Oh, so he was leaving.
He was leaving out of the back. And I want to say after 15 days, maybe that's when I started getting notices that, hey, he's not there. I said, that's not true because, you know.
You walked him to the front door?
Yeah, I'm there, you know. And so after that, the counselor, she gave me her number. And so I would start calling. I would say, hey, you know, I just let Terrence out in the front. You know, I can't be charged. I can't pay $500 for a kid that's not there that I'm bringing to school. So, you know, that went on for maybe 4 months, you know, off and on. And I told her, I said, hey, my kid is struggling here. What can we do? Nothing, no avenue. So one day on my way home from work, I got a call. It was a police officer. And he said, are you Greta Alexander? I said, yes. And he said, I need you to meet me on Granbury Road. It's a street in Fort Worth. And when I got there, they had my son there. And he had been walking in the middle of the street because that was my first experience with the ice.
Okay, so your son was high on methamphetamine.
Yes.
Okay.
And
also
I did
called
not
ice.
know. Yes.
And you did not. And how old was he?
He was 14 at the time.
Okay.
So, yeah. So
that's a pretty shocking call.
Yes. Yes, it was. And so immediately, you know, of course, the first thing you do as a parent, we start trying to look for extra help outside of the school. So I put him in a rehab. MHMR. He went through the program, 30 days, went back to school. 3 days later, was high again with the same group of guys.
Were you trying to get him to a private school or somewhere else, or you just couldn't afford it?
I just couldn't afford it. I just could not afford to put him back in a private setting. And by this time, the decision to get high was already there, you know, and there was no one at the school that, you know, I even had one teacher tell me, I have 30 other kids to think about, and you're one I can't focus on. And I told her, I said, well, at least if you could just call me, you know, just give me a call. If he don't show up, you know, give me a call, you know. So most of my work days was worrying about him. So the second time he left and was high, I found him at, you know, some friend's house, not my friends, but his friends, and he was passed out. And so I put him in a 45-day program this time. Didn't help, so he quit school.
At what age?
In 11th grade. he stopped going to school, and he just never recovered from the drug scene. And, like I said, a year ago, he died, and he overdosed. And, people don't want to admit it, that that's what it is, but that's what it was,
He was in a bad environment.
Yes.
And you had no money or resources to remove him.
No. And I believe if I would have had an opportunity to send him to a better place, and like I say, I have a couple of kids that made it through high school, and they are okay. But then I have my baby. He just didn't make it, and I regret that today. I wish that there was something, but there wasn't any other way. I had to send him there.
Like an education savings account.
Yes. If I'd had that choice back then, he may be alive today. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm trying. Okay. So, but, it's a lot of parents where I come from that
Feel the same way as you?
Yeah. If
Where
they
you come
had a
from?
choice. I come from Fort Worth, the east side of Fort Worth.